Hello and welcome to Talking Points here on WESN, the content capital. My name is Keaton Shaw.
And I'm Sean Michael Small, and while it may seem as though things are just an ordinary day in paradise, right now, I believe this is the second day for the crime symposium, the regional symposium, upon which various leaders of the various Caribbean islands have already weighed in some of their opinions with regards to the situation that it seems we all face. We've pointed out a few stories on Talking Point and also on AM Prime, well, a lot more stories with regards to many other Caribbean countries are seeing an escalation in crime and gun violence. It might not necessarily all be at the same level of TNT, but relative to populations and historical trends, everybody's seeing a surge, and it seems to be something of a major regional concern now. It's not necessarily just a local problem.
You will forgive my subtle laughter at the beginning of the program. I actually was expecting my co-host to sound a little bit more depressed than he actually did. But no, you've raised a good point, because I think, to me, one of the surprising developments over the last couple of years is the crime levels in St. Lucia, for example. St. Lucia, which was, and it still is, a heavily tourist-marketed state. Their crime and their violence that they're facing on that island is rather remarkable over the last couple of years. So, yes, regionally, it is an issue. Domestically, it's an issue. And whilst domestically, governments across the region seem to have a lot of difficulties in facing crimes, the Bajan Police Force and Defense Force are now in St. Lucia, trying to help St. Lucia tackle their crime situation. If we don't have answers domestically, how can we contribute to a conversation regionally? But, so said, we may get ideas. Thus far, not much in terms of ideas.
Well, like I said, opinions have been given on the first day. I believe there was not just speeches, but a foreign type setting. We also have later on the Prime Minister's remarks. I think it is interesting again. I'm not so sure if everybody will follow what I find interesting with regards to his political messaging. And then, of course, it's Tuesday, so later on we have to have a word with someone from Tobago and the new party. That doesn't really seem like much so far. But anyway, we'll get into that much later on. But first, let's start things off with a daily review. And Keaton, this point I find interesting because technically this actually goes counter to some of the things that I've been saying over the last couple of months with regards to perhaps we need somebody on the outside now to have distance who would be harder to reach, harder to corrupt, harder to threaten. And meanwhile, the Prime Minister of Jamaica is like, whoa, let's not rely on outside aid. We need to be able to do, the majority of this, if not everything, on our own. We can't be dependent, because what happens if anything goes wrong with that foreign aid? Or rather, how could we just depend on foreign aid and then our own systems are just, porous, useless, etc.?
Well, the Jamaican Prime Minister made the point that international partners need to do more. But in that same breath, he also said, hold on, domestically, we need to do our part as well. He referenced the fact that AK-47s are no longer the weapon of choice in Jamaica, but Glocks and AR-15s are the weapons of choice in conducting crimes. And he alluded to the fact that they're manufactured in the United States. Now, as you are aware, there's an appeal going on for a lawsuit that includes some CARICOM members, Mexico and the United States, versus gun manufacturers. And I'm wondering if he was alluding to that legal proceeding with respect to international partners having to do more. In terms of international partners having to do more from a financial standpoint, one might argue that given from our geopolitical standpoint and the influence that the Caribbean could have on the wider world, for example, Tobago being a transshipment point, I'm wondering if he's also referring to more sea and border patrols from international partners such as the United States or such as Canada. But beyond that, the point that we've stressed on here on Talking Point, and he did mention it in his speech yesterday, which is ensuring that borders and ports are properly protected to curb the flow of illegal firearms. That point that he made is absolutely crucial, because at the end of the day, I don't think it necessarily matters where a product is manufactured. It's how it's getting into our country that is the issue, because border security has to do with us. Border security has to do with the government of the Republic of the Island. Border security does not necessarily have to do with the United States, with Mexico, with Suriname.
Right, yes.
If you're making the argument with how is it that these countries are allowing those items to leave their territory and make it to our waters, then those countries will say, in the same sense, it's how you're allowing such items to enter your territory, and it's how you're allowing these items to be a transshipment point. Because if I look at drugs, for example, drugs coming in from Colombia, drugs coming in from Venezuela, from Mexico, from islands to Trinidad and Tobago, it's coming to Trinidad and Tobago, then leaving Trinidad and Tobago. So the argument that I'm making is, at the end of the day, whilst you are arguing for international partners to do a lot more, quite frankly, we're not necessarily helping ourselves. And I don't think we've done enough as a nation. I focus more on Trinidad and Tobago, but it is a CARICOM symposium. So perhaps CARICOM as an entire body has not done enough to protect the Caribbean waters.
I mean, so I think my thoughts wasn't necessarily to get a lot of foreign assets. My thing was kind of similar to the concept of the film The Untouchables, where Elliot Ness gets a team together that he could be fairly certain is uncorrupted. No one is in the pocket of Capone, because at the start of the film, it's not necessarily historically accurate, but the point is at the start of the film, his first attempt to get Capone is already undermined by the fact that somebody's taking bribes in the unit and Capone is aware of what's going on. So my thought is, to some extent, do we need people to conduct a certain level of investigation that we could have a degree of surety? Well, it's harder to get to them, because it's not just corruption. There's also, you could utilize like a combination of both, like a carrot and stick approach, where I threaten you to get you on the hook, and then once you're on the hook, now it's hard for you to be clean and to turn me in, right? So that was my thought. The use of foreign assets, I think there's just way too much Caribbean Sea to try to cover everything. The ports of entry are very obvious choke points where, and we're in control of that. We can't really give that to a foreign jurisdiction to run for us. That would be silly. We're in control of that. Those are natural choke points, because we know it's coming through here. We know that literally this very small dot, when we look at the map of TNT, this very small dot, we believe a significant amount of the guns and potentially drugs are coming through, and we still can't stop it. And if that's not porous, I don't know what is. And I don't know to what extent we could have the lawsuit in the States, and it could very well go in our favor, because that's a very political issue. So what is law and what is desired might be two different things, right? Depending on the jurisdiction. But that probably won't solve the whole problem, because at the end of the day, there will always be smuggling and crimes, and they'll figure it out. It might not be the same amount of guns, and it might not be as easy to get the guns here. But the guns, to some extent, will still come here. And I don't think we've seen the amount of guns that potentially have come into our borders. I don't think we've actually seen them be utilized in criminal activity, right? You only need a handful of guns, at least, rifles, to do the few crimes that we've seen. So that's what scares me. The amount that's coming in that we don't know about, that's estimated, is supposed to be in the thousands, but we don't even need the thousands. We just need a few dozen to get a good chunk of the violence that we see now. So I don't think that trial will solve the problem. So what will solve the problem is if we figure out a way to clean up our border security.
I think also you have to ask yourself whether or not, and questions like this have been previously asked, and it's unsatisfactory answers that I've received. And whether or not TNT, we know it's a transshipment point for drugs, but are we a transshipment point for guns and ammunition as well?
Potentially.
You know, and that's the thing. So it's also a matter, not what we're allowing in, it's also what we're allowing to leave. In 2023, and you know, it is a question I'm asking, if it is easier to acquire an illegal firearm or illegal ammunition than it is to open a bank account, where are we as a nation?
Now, the one good new silver lining could be that that might explain where the guns go to. Because it's not like we see thousands of guns being utilized to commit violence annually, right? Or tens of thousands of guns. I think the estimate is only tens of thousands. So perhaps you're right. Perhaps we are a transshipment point for guns, in which case now we are part of other people's problems, not just for drugs. So again, the hypocrisy of us, you know, trying to tell the gun manufacturers, hey, y'all need to buck up. Meanwhile, we're aiding and abetting potentially stuff going on in Latin America. Because it's not as though composite North America manufactured weapons somehow were made there and are going north. They're coming south, if anything. So
I take responsibility, and I'm sure so do you, for what enters your home and for what leaves your home.
the law will have me take responsibility
Right.
for it.
Precisely. So therefore, we as a nation and the government also has to take responsibility for what enters Trinbago and what leaves Trinbago.
Moving on quick, before we run out of time, the St. Vincent's PM, Ralph Gonzalez, he has also now joined the chorus of people saying, well, to some extent inaccurately, well, I don't know about St. Vincent, bring back the death penalty. He believes at the end of the day, look, there will be, we need to take this measure. Now, again, the debate is to what extent is it a deterrent, but I think coming out of the discussion, because I think it was either one professor criminologist, I can't remember his name right now, he did admit that the death penalty potentially still has a place. And this is where I begrudgingly have to agree. When you do not think that there is hope for rehabilitation, where there's most likely somebody who will be a repeat offender, and I don't know if life in prison is necessarily a punishment to a certain level of criminals.
Not necessarily. It is a punishment to you and I, because at the end of the day, even if we are struggling at home to pay our bills, we're still paying for those individuals to have 3 square meals, every day. Human rights people will argue, listen, the conditions within the prisons are absolutely appalling. So let's not discuss that in its entirety. But at the same time, the hangman never left. The hangman is on sabbatical, and we totally understand that. What is next is that whether or not legislative framework needs to be implemented or be in place in order to have hangings once more within that time period. Pratt and Morgan, a case of which we've spoken about innumerable times. In that particular sense, I've always questioned if Trinbago, or by extension other Caribbean nations or Commonwealth nations, were to move away from the Caribbean Court of Justice, which they established, CCJ came out of CARICOM. No, well, if we move away from the Privy Council, our next, the court that we get signed to is CCJ. But CCJ has already stated
they agree with.
Yeah, they're not necessarily in favor of the death penalty. We've heard that the death penalty is not a deterrent. It's a very weak deterrent, if anything. If the death penalty is to be once more practiced, because it still exists, if it is to be implemented and completely practiced, then you have to wonder if it's going to take legislative framework where we move away from these courts, establish a new court. I think that's the only way it's going to be sorted out, because 5 years for what? 2 or 3 claims?
But you're taking it's the same pool of judges that you'll be recruiting from. So it's not necessarily, it's like saying, well, the telecom provider is the same technician. So at some level, the customer service, the same pool of employees, it's going to be very similar. I agree in a sense, because the Prime Minister Gonzalez, he did say, not for crimes of passion, but murders. Right? And I think he means premeditated murders. That's what I think he's going for. I agree. It was, I believe, Douglas Mendez right, that might have been the one to say it, that it's not a deterrent. And I think, yes, we've heard it before. Young men in crime now, they don't have a high life expectancy for themselves. So how is that death penalty in several years away going to deter them? But I do think that in the sense of, think about the Joel Chady case and his enforcer, right? Now maybe you don't necessarily hang the entire gang, but the enforcer had a reputation. And this was a very bloody case. Do you expect do you expect serious chance to rehabilitate him? And I would say, in some cases, society might say, look, we rather just execute them, than trying to risk them, for whatever, in whatever way to continue, whether behind bars or out in the free world.
If you use Dolce as an example, and we speak about the death penalty, I have never heard a criminal lawyer argue for the death penalty. I have not heard a criminal lawyer in favor of the death penalty. I'd love to meet a criminal lawyer who actually has an argument for the death penalty to hear their side. But look at Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, for example. When he was a defense attorney prior to becoming the Attorney General, he was not in favor of the death penalty. He actually stood against it. He advocated against it. When he became the Attorney General, so now you're under the clothes of a politician, he actually went against his own arguments against the death penalty in order to push for Dole Shady to be hung. So this is the thing. Criminal lawyers might, and it ties back into what you're saying about a pool of judges, criminal lawyers might never be for the death penalty. Politicians could say easily on a platform because, again, it's just very easy to say, bring back the hangman.
Here's the thing. To some extent, if I'm a lawyer, my opinion is mine. If I'm a politician, technically, my opinion is not supposed to be just mine. So this is now the debate where, and it goes to the judiciary versus legislature. Where does the final say lie? Because if a democracy says, no, but at any day, we don't care what you think, judges, we want the death penalty, right? Is it ethically right for judges to say, well, no, it's unconstitutional? Whose constitution? At what point does the Constitution actually say that? And to be fair, there are human rights considerations, because again, it isn't a deterrent. So what is the point and the purpose? Is it just because we want to commit violence back on criminals? There are a whole host of other problems with the criminal justice system, like the detection rate, which to some extent makes the death penalty a very moot point. But I do think, though, that is an interesting point where, depending on how things goes, for better or worse, if the public says we want this, and the high courts and the final courts of appeal are saying, no, you can't have it, to what extent is that democracy? It's a very tricky thing, and I'm not going to pretend to say I know the right answer.
Let me just conclude with this thought, and it's a provocative thought. An eye for an eye. Do you think that taking, and I've argued for the death penalty, I've argued against the death penalty. All right, I have not made my position clear because I like to debate all around. I like to look at every single angle. But do you think that taking the life of one individual, for them taking the life of another individual, is justifiable? An eye for an eye. And not necessarily for you to answer, but it's just for people to think about all around. We've argued for the death penalty. At the same time, if we're arguing for the death penalty, let's hear arguments against it, so we have a better understanding. Anyway, that's it for this particular segment on Talking Points. When we return from this commercial break, we'll get into your Cue This segment. Stay tuned to the program.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Well, folks, our own Prime Minister was one of the featured speakers yesterday at the Regional Crime Symposium, where he went into, to some extent, what he thought was the reasons for crime. And he wasn't completely biased for his own party's history in their role as leaders of the country during their times in office. However, he had some interesting things to say with regards to the source. Let's take a listen to cue this.
And by 2022, the annual count was over 600, a new record, already being challenged by the murder rate for 2023. Except for COVID in a pandemic, none of the listed dangerous diseases have taken lives like this, and that in medical care and attention. All of these are frequent, daily incurred costs, and they are to be borne by taxpayers at every level, from scarce revenues diverted from other more deserving productive priorities. In the political arena, some believe it's all about having the right national security minister. Others share the epiphany of separating the Ministry of National Security into fragments of Homeland Security and Defense. I wish it was that simple. In recent years, we, Trinidad and Tobago, had 10 ministers of national security sourced from career politicians, including that of Prime Minister. The military and the private sector had one minister who served for 7 unbroken years, grappling with the upsurge of violent crime and insufficiency of policing. A succeeding administration, the UNC, in a 5-year term, had 5 national security ministers with junior assistants, with tenure ranging from a few months each to 2 years. This current administration, PNM, has had 3 ministers in 8 years. And the one indisputable fact in all these musical chairs is that the violence has not abated. It has in many instances increased and become even more cynical. Clearly, the problem does not exist and grow because of a shortage of ministers or even ministerial output. Ladies and gentlemen, just look at media reports. They appear to be telling us that across the region, territories are under siege from the acts of crime and violence from elements of our own society. Just minorities who are today creating larger atmospheres of fear, despondency, trauma, surrender, and hopelessness among all of us. This is a battle in which we must all be engaged. This is a war that we cannot afford to lose. In this engagement, governments are open to uncomplimentary charges of, some say, indifference, others say impotence, unimaginative planning, discrimination, abdication of duties, poor leadership, and with the repeated calls for resignations. Old talk is cheap. That crime and violence are now a major part of the Caribbean's overall plethora of problems. When such a situation arrives at the door, it is said that there was a failure of the society to stop the oncoming crisis. Then there may be a later failure to perceive the extent of that arrived situation as a societal problem. Further, there may be problems of finding solutions, and whether the solutions selected may even succeed. Today, if there's one aspect that we all may be guilty of, is that the problem of criminality and violence was not dealt with sufficiently in a much earlier time frame. In the homes, in the schools, in the prisons, in the courts, and I dare say in the parliaments. There was what can be described as, quote, a creeping normalcy, unquote. We allowed slow, moderate, deviant behavioral trends to increase. We allowed slips in our age-old standards, in ethical and moral norms in our family homes, in our schools, in public institutions, on our roads, and in public places. All of which, hindsight reminds us that we should have checked very early. Instead, we seem to have been saying that these times are different. This is the age of American gun culture. As we adopt the internet revolution with its tremendous promises and all its warts, an age of selfish individualism has been allowed to flourish at the expense of the society itself. So morals and values are now considered flexible. Their lines are blurred, and they occupy spheres of their own, determined and shaped by one's personal whims, the present, fashionable social trends, and worse, the political and bureaucratic shortcomings of something malleable called the system.
That was the Prime Minister yesterday at, near the start of the regional symposium. And, of course, his entire contribution was 16 minutes. You could get the other 2/3 if you check it out on YouTube. I, to some extent, recommend it. But to focus in on one main observation I had, he acknowledged that there were issues with society, and that could be one of the root causes of crime, which is stuff that a lot of people have said. And to some extent, I agree with that. Not too sure if he's going to disagree. Notice he didn't necessarily talk about the economic situation that we're currently in, because the Minister of National Security did not agree with that point. But it seems as though while he's acknowledging society's failures and government's part to play as, the elected leadership of society, the direct efforts of the political leadership, the Minister of National Security, etc., National Security Council, is implied. To me, it's almost like if he's trying to figure out a way to reduce that blow, or to say, to outright say, no, it's not really Minister of National Security fault. We've tried all these different combinations and nothing has worked. And I feel as though he understands the problem a lot. You can't say that he is ignorant of what's going on. But I also feel as though he doesn't have like a worldview or an ideology that will account for all the factors. They're all still separate, different things that he's thinking about. And you can't just treat it as separate, different things in silos. You have to account for everything. So while society could be the cause of crime, to some extent, ineffectual leadership, we can't just discount that. Just because everybody essentially failed, that's what he's saying. That doesn't mean that it's not their fault. Sorry, just because the results were bad with everybody, that doesn't not necessarily mean that everybody has failed. I would argue to say that all of the ministers of national security we've had for the last 20 years have not been able to do enough to clamp down on this.
You see, there are two sides. I'm trying to be fair to the Prime Minister. There are two sides to that speech, his opening speech. One, okay, great, self-criticism. I'm acknowledging that in the last 8 years, I've had 3 ministers and we've not seen a change in the situation. I'm also suggesting that in the 5 years that the United National Congress were in power, they had 5 ministers and nothing seemed to change or get better from there. But if we focus on his period and if we focus on his political speech, before I mentioned it last week Friday, he himself has said that if a government cannot focus on the issues of crime, paraphrasing here by the way, they are part of the problem as well. So self-criticism, okay, great, good. The next aspect, whilst you have stood on a platform and done that, in your own words, old talk is cheap. Mm-hmm. Because at the same time, I'm looking in the mirror and criticizing constructively the position that, listen, it's not just a matter of government ministers. It's beyond that. You've actually not done anything beyond that, right? So if you are suggesting that this is the case, what's the point of having a Minister of National Security?
Yeah.
Precisely, what is the point? You, to me, in that entire speech, you've made an argument against having a Minister of National Security. So there is no point in me having that position. There's no point in an individual stating that. You said where other resources can be utilized. Good. Remove that, remove the salary, and remove the benefits, and that money could benefit something or some other entity somewhere else. At the end of the day, I can appreciate what the Prime Minister was trying to allude to, but I can also point out you have not done anything about it at all. So, we'll talk is cheap.
I think, first of all, police is less than 50% of the national security budget. I don't understand why we spend over 50% on other things, except maybe administration, intelligence, and those sorts of things. Fine. Do we need Defense Force and Coast Guard that isn't contributing anything to this situation? That's enough. That's significant, in my opinion, except for more also. But I think the point that you raised where he said, well, a government that isn't, what was the paraphrase? I don't want to misquote.
Government who cannot recognize the problem or who does nothing about it is part of the problem.
Did he say that specifically about crime?
He said it was specifically about crime. The exact words, obviously, because
once it was specifically about crime, because therein ultimately lies point. He cannot be right now and right then. Because there he's saying government has a responsibility, and now he's saying, well, look, some will say that we have been negligent and this and that, and look, it doesn't matter which Minister of Security, it's not about us, it's about society. And to some extent, how much is he acknowledging government's role as leaders in society, and how much is he separating government from society?
Society
to blame society.
Society will take lessons from its leaders. And usually how it goes, society looks up to its leaders. And if society today is the problem, and I acknowledge that society today is a part of the problem, then based off of what I've been taught growing up, the kinds of leaders, society today, and what society is today, only translates the kinds of leaders that we have in Trinidad and Tobago.
I as much as I like the song Bring Back the Old Time Days, I think we look at the old times being so much better and morally better and ethically better, and people were nicer. Times were simpler. But I think we underestimate just how much nicer society was, right? If you go back through history, both recent and distant, they have a lot of less than savory characters, not just in crime, but also in politics.
You see, Trinidad is sweet. Trinidad used to be sweet.
It's just, I say that when he talks about, the internet and modern society.
No, Trinidad used to be sweet. It still is sweet, but it used to be sweeter. And it could be even sweeter. The issue with Trinidad and Tobago is we don't help ourselves. We don't do anything to help ourselves. And I cannot say that I'm inspired by any leader from any political ring, and it's very difficult to, there are leaders within society, but they do not get the spotlight that they deserve.
We don't help ourselves, and that predates the internet and any influence that might give. Folks, we have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to switch gears now and go to Tobago. A new party was launched. We just didn't hear that much about it. Wait,
was it launched or is it still on the launch pad?
I'm not sure exactly. Folks, stay tuned. This is Talking About a WESN, your content capital. That and more after this.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, feeding accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher Price, Cocomelon, Intex Pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in-store at 7 Main Road, McBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight. Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Safe and sound, that's how we'll get you to the biggest North Coast Jazz ever. No hassle and no worries. Park your ride at the Queen's Park Savannah. Hop on board a safe and secure shuttle with your $100 return fee, and that's it. Service begins at 10 a.m. through 1 p.m. and returns from festival grounds from 7 p.m. Park and ride, a $100 return fee, first come, first go shuttle service to festival grounds Blashy shares. No hassle and no worries. North Coast Jazz, May 27th. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 38 Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.
And folks, today is Tuesday, the day of the week where we try to tackle at least one important issue with regards to Tobago. And joining us is the Minority Leader of the THA. He is Kelvin Morris. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Keaton. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Mr. Morris.
Well, Mr. Morris, of course, we asked you to come on your show expecting to get your response to the launch of a new political entity, which I have been waiting for since January. Now, I will be honest, full disclosure, I don't necessarily agree with everything that any politician says, and yourself included. However, I have to admit, this situation, I can't necessarily disagree with you, at least not fully, because I do find Farley set the goalpost of January, now we're in April, now the goalpost was set again for yesterday. We're here today. I have different views on the need for this whole process already. But I didn't set the goalpost. Other people did. And the fact that there's no follow through with what is being said is what worries me. What about you?
Well, I mean, this thing is such a comedy of errors, and we are all over the place. Like, honestly, Tobagonians right now, we are just waiting to exhale, because this current arrangement, and I continue to tell people, it is, when you look at the very characteristic of Mr. Augustine is now coming across to people as somebody very untrustworthy, because what Mr. Augustine says and what Mr. Augustine does are complete opposite, and you just cannot trust his word. You cannot trust him to be consistent. I challenge the media, I challenge all of Trinidad and Tobago to look at anything, any kind of commitment that Mr. Augustine has given, and check it out for yourself. See if he had been consistent in keeping those commitments. And I'm talking now more than the party. We had a situation where we had Mr. Augustine giving a commitment that he would do a reshuffle. That reshuffle was promised since last December. Where is that reshuffle now? We had a situation where Mr. Augustine promised the public servants in Tobago something called an ex gratia payment. He said that ex gratia would be paid last Christmas. Where is that ex gratia? We have Mr. Augustine promising us a party launch last week. And up to this, we came yesterday again. And up to now, we are none the wiser as to what this party is. I mean, all we have a name, but whether they name it Farley Saltfish Party or the Tobago People Party, regardless of whatever he pours over that, what it is really a situation of a desperate leader trying to hold on to power by any means necessary. And I agree with Dr. Vanos James when he says, how could someone claim to have a democratic party but try to hold on to an undemocratic government. And it's just, it really is confusing. We are confused in Tobago.
Well, Mr. Morris, I'm surprised to see that you agree with Mr. James. I wonder if you might have said that about 2 years ago. But you've also suggested that people are misinterpreting how a true political party is formed. Could you elaborate on that? Exactly what is a true political party, and how is a true political party even formed?
Well, that is the question, Keaton. And when you look at the genesis of this party that they are now calling the Tobago Party, how many persons would have participated in that process? As far as my count is, nothing more than 200 to 300 persons. And in terms of we are hearing about a constitution. How many Tobagonians participated in that constitution? So this thing about ground up, it is nonsensical. And when you think about charging people, it was advertised $350 to come to be a part and be a member. How many Tobagonians right now could afford $350 to purchase party membership? Because we have a situation in Tobago where we are at comatose. The Tobago economy is completely dead. And you speak to anyone across the length and breadth of Tobago, Farley and his band of jokers, joyriders, they have crushed Tobago. Just last night, we had a situation where you have our university students studying abroad. They are now on the verge of being kicked out because Farley and they have not prioritized paying these students tuition. Instead, they prefer. So you have a situation where you have students in Jamaica. Farley could find money for 14 persons to fly over to Jamaica to learn how to build houses and to go and sign an MOU. But you can't find money to pay for the students. And this is the thing, Tobagonians are completely fed up. And we are at the point where it just simply requires for Farley, if he's forming his party, all well and good. We are all for democracy.
But Mr. Morris,
come back to the polls.
You keep alluding to Farley's party. Is this really Farley's party, or is this a party of executives within the Tobago House of Assembly who've gone without a name or a symbol? You focused a lot on Farley Augustine, but what about the other executive members?
Keaton, it has always been about Farley. Check it out. Farley is, that's why I call it the Saltfish party, because it's Farley being in everything. Farley is this de facto Secretary of Tourism. Farley's jetting off to all the different trade shows for tourism. Farley is the de facto Secretary of Settlements. Farley is jetting off to go and sign MOU on behalf of the Division of Settlements. I surprise the one division that Farley should be paying attention to, he is not. In fact, just recently we had a situation where he sent his deputy to go to an IMF conference, and he's the Secretary of Finance. But this has always been about Farley. And the others are holding on to Farley for power. These people by themselves, they have no identity. In fact, when they had the campaign was simply telling people that Farley would be Chief Secretary. And in this dispensation, all they're telling people is that Farley will be the leader, and believe that Tobagonians will somehow buy into that nonsense. But Tobagonians now are clear about who Farley is. We have seen Farley for over a year and a half, and Farley is untrustworthy. Farley is a man without a plan. Farley lacks leadership capacity. Tobago is facing a serious leadership crisis as we speak.
Is Farley a threat to the PNM Tobago Council?
Pardon me?
Is Farley Augustine a threat to the PNM Tobago Council?
Absolutely not. Farley is a threat to the people of Tobago, because at this point, Tobago is completely being emasculated by the incompetence of Farley and those persons holding on to Farley's trousers.
Now, Mr. Morris, so one thing, because I've said this before, so just so I could be upfront, I disagree with the point that the whole resignation from the PDP, I disagree that that was an issue, just based off how the THA Act is structured. However, so I disagree with Dr. Vannerstream's statements that you made earlier, but I do agree with Dr. Vannerstream's statements where he said that this whole process to make a party is taken away from the actual business of running the government, the THA, the administration for Tobago. And you pointed out the cabinet reshuffle that was supposed to take place, that we're also waiting on that. And it seems as though the party launch has superseded that. And we're not even getting to any sort of result with that. And we could only speculate as to what else with regards to official government business is being put on the back burner as the members of the executive focus on this as opposed to their own jobs, which I guess goes back to your point. So I'm not necessarily going to agree, but do you agree with that, though, that this whole process, I don't necessarily like it, but I can't help but say this dog and pony show now, which is very political and not much governance. Do you think that this is, the longer this goes on, the worse this just is going to look for the executives?
I sort of missed a couple of what you said there, Sean. So I don't know if you can repeat the final part, because I missed the final part, which I suppose would have had the real meat of the question.
Well, the longer this goes on, is this just going to make the executive look worse and worse? Because we don't know what else is being put on hold to launch this party, to settle this party, to create this party, but yet we still haven't even seen anything much of a party.
Well, that is the point, and I suspect that this would be dragged on, and they would have to Begonians, carry the burden of their incompetence for a long period. So I expect that they would not just automatically transition into a party, because you see, part of the narrative is they know that Tobagonians are saying, we did not vote for this. We did not vote for independence. What we voted for, we believed in the PDP's mandate. We believed in their mantra, let's fix this. And we gave them the opportunity. But within a year, that crashed. And in fact, that government collapsed. And what you had was fragmented persons holding on to power. And we are now at a position where they have now formalized themselves into a party which people didn't vote for. And they know Tobagonians will be clamoring for an election. So I suspect they will drag this on and pretend, because if you look at the narrative of Farley, he was going to launch this party as his administration's party. And then he backpedaled and said, no, this is really the party of the people, and I'm just the facilitator. And we know that is a game. We know that is not true.
Mr. Martin, right? So I know that you're his political opponent, so obviously we will all have to take the answer with a grain of salt, but I'm still curious to ask you the question. Yes, you've alluded to it. Farley is up front, and maybe there's one or two key people behind him, and then after that, we don't necessarily hear much. And is it that they just weren't ready for the success of winning the last election? They weren't prepared, and now we're potentially seeing the lack of preparation or the lack of experience?
Well, you're so correct. Remember, the whole clamor was about 21 years of PNM governance, and I'm not saying that the PNM was perfect. I'd be the first to say that the PNM made errors, and over time they would have disappointed people. Persons would have had their different grievances, and they decided they wanted change. That is all fair, and that is all well. But what you had was a bunch of persons who had no kind of experience, no kind of exposure, not prepared, and they were able to benefit from, the disenchantment that was basically in the space at the time. And now that they're in the seat of the power, they are ill prepared. They do not have any plans. They do not have the competencies, and that is being reflected throughout. And the persons now are becoming frustrated because the governance that they would have expected, the governance they hoped for, it is woefully lacking in Tobago. Tobago at this point has a serious leadership crisis, and I say that across divisions. When you speak to leaders, public servants, senior public servants, they are saying that there's no kind of consistency, there's no kind of clear policy, and there's no kind of leadership. And this is what is really the crux of the matter. So whether it's a new party, but the point of the matter is that the business of Tobago continues to suffer. And that is where my concern is.
Mr. Morris, I'm just going to ask you to pause. We need to take a quick break for our news on the hour segment, but just stay with us for a moment. We'll just get into some more questions following this. We'll be right back afterwards.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Regional heads agree crime scourge needs to end. 6 shot, 1 dead in Temple Street Arima shooting. Commissioner launches investigation into woman seen in what appears to be a police-issued uniform. And internationally, Italian police find cocaine packages floating in the Sea of Sicily. Now for the details. The curtains will come down today on the CARICOM Crime Symposium at Hyatt. All regional heads agree that crime scourge needs to end.
We need the CARICOM Secretariat working with governments and the Attorney General actively going forward to create templates of useful laws that can be adopted in all our territories, saving time and money.
We need cooperation on forensics, and we need, finally, to deconstruct all the rules in our police service and reconstruct them.
A shooting in Temple Street, Pinto, Arima has left 1 person dead and 5 others injured. According to reports, 3 gunmen entered the premises around 10:30 last night during a birthday party at the residence and began shooting. When the smoke cleared, it was discovered that 6 persons were shot. 41-year-old Candace Griffith of Nelson Street, Arima, died at the scene. The injured were all taken to hospital. Commissioner of Police Earl Harewood Christopher has ordered an investigation into a video that has gone viral on social media purporting to show a woman in what appears to be a TTPS-issued police uniform. In the video, the unidentified woman is seen wearing a TTPS-issued operational shirt and a pair of black tights, not in keeping with the policy which guides the proper use of uniforms issued to police officers. All officers are reminded that police-issued uniforms must be cared for in accordance with established TTPS policies and guidelines. In international news now, police have found and recovered packages of cocaine worth more than 400 million euros floating in the sea off the island of Sicily, Italy. Italian police said it was probably one of the largest drug hauls ever made in the country. The drug was found bound into 70 packages and fitted with a tracking device. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Martin. Thanks for watching.
Artists you'll meet. The sounds will astonish you. Superb voices, new artists, simply refreshing. Celebrate amazing. May 27th, North Coast Jazz and Heritage Festival. Festival grounds Blanchisseuse. Born here, played here.
Tickets available at Crosby St. James, Kenny's Sport, Extra Foods, Mart's Liquor Palace, 14 Diego Martin Main Road, and WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook.
Welcome back to Talking Point. Mr. Kelvin Morris is still with us. Thank you, sir, for your time this morning as we continue the conversation. I appreciate the points that you have raised and that you've actually disseminated this morning. But I'd like to shift focus for a moment on the PNM Tobago Council. The reason being is because the PNM Tobago Council is not right now very much strong in the sense that you've described a leadership crisis in Tobago. I think many people can argue the same for the PNM Tobago Council. Is this not an opportunity, given the weakened state of the THA executives and the fact that even though the THA Act does not recognize party, there is no collective party in Tobago amongst the executives? Isn't this an opportunity for the Tobago Council to actually rebuild themselves?
Well, we've always been doing the work. And, you know, one thing we say and one thing you can credit the PNM for, whether we are in government or out of government, we continue to work on behalf of the people. And therefore, we understand that if we are to truly represent people and to be better as well, it requires us to do a lot of groundwork. So I know on the ground persons may have been saying some of the feedback I get is that you all need to be more visible and so forth. And what has been happening is that because the party would have experienced such an overwhelming defeat, you know, it would have taken some time for persons to build back confidence to be out there as well. So we've been doing the necessary institutional strengthening to ensure that, you know, all organs of the party are well equipped to interface with the public. And I think a lot of that has been done, and we are now ready to really be out and about. And in the coming weeks, that should be unfolding in a major way. Without giving away too much, but I know the political leader and his council team, because one of the things I must express is that I'm not an executive member of the PNM Tobago Council. So therefore, I'm speaking simply as a member of the party now. But understanding at the Tobago Council level what is happening, I can assure you that the party is well equipped, we are well prepared, and a lot of groundwork have gone on, you know, on the low. In terms of us being ready.
Though you've given that assurance, you know, as you've just pointed out, one of the major criticisms is being more visible. So whilst you are the minority leader of the Tobago House of Assembly and you are in a position to bring these issues to light, is the PNM Tobago Council in any position to be critical of any political party in Tobago right now?
Of course, sure. And even as minority leader, I can say without contradiction, Tobagonians would tell you, if you're to have heard it, I've seen polls and all different, I am and continue to be the most visible, most active area representative. I continue not only to serve my area, but I continue to be up and about, you know, treating with the entire Tobago. And so, as I said, the party itself continues to do the kind of work that is necessary to ensure that when we bring policies and so forth, there are policies that really speak to the heart of Tobagonians, understanding what Tobagonians require with respect to agriculture. There are a lot of work that started that we would continue with respect to ensuring that we can provide farmers with the kind of support, one, ensuring that they have tenureship and that kind of thing. When we look at tourism, two of the major challenges with tourism is access and accommodation. So it means that we need to be able to woo more airlines, but at the same time, we need to also have we need to add more rooms, and we need to add quality. In fact, we need to add some brand names as well in Tobago when it comes to hotel. So that is easy for, you know, there's some kind of synergy between the brands and the airlines and the travelers. So therefore, that is something we need to really look at in a big way. When we look at human capital development, one of the challenges we have as well in Tobago is with our young people. We send them out, they get qualified, then they come back to Tobago frustrated because there are limited opportunities here. We have not built out in a robust way, you know. Sorry.
But we don't have too much time, so I want to ask a final question. Now, granted, I'll happily discuss tourism with you at a later date. I don't agree with everything you just said, but some of what you just said, I actually think is interesting. But with regards to this current situation, I'm not saying that it's probable. I'm not saying that it's even unlikely. It's just not impossible, given that all that we've seen in a short year, that something might happen to the executive, and we might face an election for the THA sooner rather than expected. Now, the PNM just had one of the worst defeats in an election in TNT a little over a year ago. Is the PNM ready in case something like that comes up sooner rather than later? Because the irony is, the more successful you are here with this message, the more likely that might be. But if the PNM is not ready, then it'll be all for naught. We'll just erode the situation. Is the PNM getting ready for that soon?
I can give you that assurance that the PNM is ready. As I said, over the last year, the PNM would have been doing a lot of groundwork quietly. In fact, in terms of policy, there are a number of committees that have been set up and been working. And so I have no doubt whether the election is today or next 2 years or so, the PNM is prepared, the PNM is ready, and the PNM have persons with the capacity to be able to take the wheel from day one and run with the governance of Tobago. So I can give the people of Tobago, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that the PNM has learned lessons, and the PNM would have really prepared itself to be able to treat with the business of Tobago and Tobago people going forward.
Mr. Morris, my final question to you, and I have to tell you, I enjoyed our conversation last week about bringing back the Tobago-ness to society. You know, and I must say, I've enjoyed this conversation this morning, and thank you for making yourself available. You know, it's not always easy to get individuals who make themselves always willing and available to have the discussion. My final question to you is, and I've raised the issue of the PNM Tobago Council because I think it is an opportunity for them, and I think you've also pointed out it is an opportunity indeed. But tying it back to something you said earlier with respect to a party for the people of Tobago, is the PNM Tobago Council, and understand where I'm going with this question, is the PNM Tobago Council really a party for the people of Tobago, or just an arm of the PNM that is in Trinidad and that is in Trinidad and really mostly focuses on Trinidad?
Well, the PNM Tobago Council was formed in 1998, and it was formed for a specific purpose, to give to Tobago PNM the autonomy to function as we envisage Trinidad and Tobago to function, and that is it. That is that whereas we have the country Trinidad and Tobago, within that national state, we have Tobago having its autonomy, meaning its complete authority to control its affairs. And that is how it is in Tobago with respect to the PNM. The Tobago Council has its own leader, its own executive, and in fact it makes decisions in accordance with what is best for the organization here in Tobago. Of course, we guided by the overall philosophy, just as Trinidad and Tobago, we're guided by the overall constitution. But what we envisage as a PNM leading the way is that eventually Tobago, like the PNM, would have its own autonomy, and Tobago, like the PNM, will be able to make decisions, make laws, and even tweak, certain aspects of the constitution to its benefit. And therefore, in terms of the PNM Tobago, yes, we have the kind of autonomy to be able to be a truly Tobago-focused and Tobago-based party. In fact, when you look at the policies of the PNM over the last 20 years, it has really been about building Tobagonians. And so that would continue.
Mr. Morris, it's been a pleasure. Thank you once more for joining us on Talking Points, and for what I will always say is an insightful and a necessary conversation. All the very best to you, sir. Keep well and continue working on that Tobago-ness. That was a very good topic.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
All the best.
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight into our phone call segment this morning. Let's open up the phone lines where you, the viewers, have the opportunity to express your thoughts and opinions. Of course, we took a little bit of time from it this morning because of this conversation, but the phone lines are on your screen. Call in and join us on the conversation again, due to the limited time, please keep your points short and sweet. And with any delays that we may have simply because of feed, it's kindly mute your television. We really don't want to cut anybody this morning. But it's good points that Mr. Morris has raised, and I can appreciate what he has suggested. My concern now is, and we all share concerns, is that Dr. Faith B. Israel via WhatsApp posted a link. It seems to say the Tobago People's Party. There is no symbol. There is just a name, whether or not that is the final name.
There's a blue on blue T.
No, that's just
how
that's just
Facebook.
That's just how Facebook does it.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So there is nothing of substance. Now I have to raise this issue. I was on another program. I was on AM Prime here on WSN this morning, and since last week I contacted Dr. B. Israel to come on the program. I've said it before, and I will make it public because we all deserve to know to the true extent. It seems as though it's very difficult to get a member of the THA executive to come on any of these programs and discuss it. And I'll elaborate a bit more on that situation in a moment. We have a call on the line with us from Tobago. Good morning, caller. Hello, good morning. Good morning.
I was just looking at your program and I saw the interview with Mr. Morris. And he said we have a problem with Tobago people leaving here and coming back and not being employed. But why do they have to leave here?
Sorry, caller, I didn't hear you too clearly.
Why do they have to leave here?
Okay.
No, I said that I was listening to the interview.
Yeah, no, you can go ahead, caller.
Mr. Morris, and he said that Tobago people leave Tobago and return and don't have employment. Why is it that they have to leave here?
Yes, I understand the point that you're raising now. I'll be very honest with you.
My opinion is that you don't have the relevant educational institutions. And for 20 years, they have been in power and they have failed to provide that. So you find now that Tobago people migrating to Trinidad and they're at the age where they might be looking for a company, so they marry and stay in Trinidad. That is about it. Or they go to another island and they marry and stay there. Or they might try opportunities in other islands because the educational institutions only go to secondary level.
All right, caller, thank you very much. Have a good day. We have to take some other callers.
Caller waiting.
Good morning, caller from Shigonas.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't understand why you would say the death penalty is not a deterrent. I have never seen a case where it was carried out that the person went on to do any more crime. You said that Ramesh Maharaj changed his mind when he went into government. That is not true. Ramesh Maharaj's personal position on it was he was against the death penalty. As Attorney General, he had to carry out the law of the land, which he did. He have explained this on a number of occasions. And we have all this crime business there. When I listen to my program, they will find out, because none of those things is going to deal with crime. Crime is a matter of maintaining law and order, and if you don't enforce your laws, that's it. And none of them is enforcing their laws. And finally, I don't know why we go and we do all this research, we find a solution, and then we throw out the solution and we decide to put a plaster on it, as Sean said yesterday. I have proven the case as what happened to National Insurance, and still he's saying throw out all that and put a plaster. Why? Why do research if you're going to choke it out and put plaster?
All right, thank you very much, Professor. Have a good day. We have to keep calls short. We have a call on the line with us from San Fernando. Good morning, caller.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I listened to those leaders yesterday, and that That's CARICOM Forum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with the name, of course, because I don't think it's a public health emergency. It's an emergency, but not a public health emergency. And you know, it was reminiscent of listening in the late 80s of Dr. Morgan Jobe, if you listen to Dr. Rowley's speech, every single thing that man said yesterday, Dr. Rowley said yesterday, Morgan Jobe said to the governments coming down for years that, and there was one thing in particular he said in 30 years, if we don't fix all those problems, education, corruption in the government services, the society, that we're going to reach exactly where we are today. We need to have better politicians, because that's the root of this issue. You know, we need to have better politicians. We need to start to root them out and get rid of them. People have to start to send the message that if you're all not working for us, we're going to get rid of you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. I think that's an excellent point, Kola, because throughout that conversation with Mr. Morris, and you see, this is the good thing with Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris is a young individual.
Yeah.
All right. So he's going to see things from a different perspective. Yes, he is aligned with one political party. Everybody is entitled to do that.
Yes.
But in that same breath, I will say that the United National Congress is not an option. Right now, if you take a look at the executive, the THA, they're not inspiring confidence, so are they really an option?
That is true.
Right?
Well, we're now starting to ask more questions.
Exactly. And the one argument that I've always said, and I have my criticisms of the PNM, and I always will, and I even have my criticisms of the administration, but the one argument I've always heard, which I cannot argue against, and I actually accept, is that the stability and the foundation of the PNM has always been there. They've always been a consistent party. Right? And I'll be fair to that. But the other parties, even right now that exist, even the United National Congress, really is not an option.
I think the problem is the other parties focus too much on defeating the PNM as opposed to doing, benefiting the nation. We have callers waiting, sorry. Right. First from Petty Valley.
Good morning, caller.
Morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean and Keaton.
Hey, good morning.
I have always wondered why I'm not hearing from Dr. Faith Israel coming after elected to speak on the program. And then I hear you this morning, and it is sad when she wanted to be elected, she was on this program every time you turn.
Yes.
But besides that, I'll leave that for now. Two, I agreed with the Prime Minister from St. Vincent, Mr. Gonzalez, yesterday, when he said poverty is not the excuse for crime. Not because you are poor or you have difficulty in getting a job or what circumstances is you have to go into crime. Although I think you should hold something that because you're poor, you're going to crime. Because I know a lot of poor people did well and didn't choose to go into crime. I think crime is a choice, not because you are poor. Have a nice day, guy.
Good point, caller. Caller, sorry, Sean. Let's take
yes.
Good morning, caller from San Juan.
Good morning to Keaton.
Good morning.
And good morning to Sean Michael.
Morning.
Yes. As we celebrate today the 29th anniversary of the 18th of April, when the great cricketing legend Brian Charles Lara broke the world record of Gary Sobers of 365. 29 years to today's date. That aside, I want to touch on, well, the previous caller is, I agree 110% with the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, Mr. Ralph Gonsalves, because poverty is not a reason for anybody committing crime. If you study the basic tenets of British law, and Mrs. Karen Nunes T-Sherrill will tell you that, any law student will tell you, the legal minds in London always tell you that poverty is not a reason to commit crime. And if poverty was a reason to commit crime, Keaton and Sean Michael, my father, who rose from sheer poverty to become a principal in the Presbyterian primary schools, well, he should have been the biggest criminal this country ever produced. He told me that for days he didn't have food to eat. He had to climb coconut trees to pick the dry coconut and take the shell, the meat out of the coconut. And poverty is not a reason for crime, because if you study the history of Trinidad and Tobago, you do an in-depth study of Trinidad and Tobago's history. In the 1940s and 50s, everybody in Trinidad, 98% of the population was poor. We had no millionaires like J.B. Fernandez and the Sabgas and so on. Everybody, 98.5% of the population were described as the poor level.
All right, caller. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. We have enough time to take one or two more calls, but I wanted, and I have to get this in. I don't know if there's a point you wanted to raise quickly.
No, just that I agree in the sense that poverty is not an excuse. Lack of opportunity compounded by negative influences is a reason. It's not an excuse because you still have to bear the consequences. You still have to bear those consequences. So I understand and I emphasize, I have empathy for those who find themselves without opportunity and they're desperate and they go to crime. You still have to take the punishments if you get caught, if you're willing to make that choice.
I wanted to raise the issue, and I will. This is the very final call for the morning. Good morning, caller from Couva. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Morning.
Alive?
Yes. Yeah, you're on air. Go ahead.
Watching TV, have you seen it?
Don't watch your TV.
You're not going to see yourself on TV. You're going to see us. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, good morning. You're live on the air right now. Go ahead with your question or your point.
I have a question.
Go
When I was younger, our uncle came and left me to the trust as a trustee to his deed. Our next uncle came who has the same name and asked me to chase over something in pencil. How would I get back that? Or what process would I go to get it back?
All right, caller, thank you. All right, so I didn't hear your question entirely clearly, but I think we will have a recording, so hopefully afterwards we can hear us, and we'll try and answer that question tomorrow. All right, I do apologize this time. But with respect to Dr. Faith B. Israel, I've tried to contact her to get on the program. I think you've even made efforts to get members of the executive of the THE, and it's proven very, very difficult, if I'm being honest. Last week, I contacted her to come on the program yesterday. She said yesterday was going to be very difficult. I understand. And I'm very much understanding that she's the Deputy Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly.
As well as Secretary for Health.
So she does have a busy schedule. But she agreed to come on AM Prime this morning, right? I tried calling Dr. B. Israel many times yesterday. Sean even called on my behalf, messaged. It is at, it was just after 2 yesterday that we get a message saying that she would not. Her exact message to me was, I will not be able to make it today, and I'm not in a position to rebook or reschedule at this time, right? The issue is, as the caller from Pitty Valley pointed out, I will make no bones about it. She made herself available all the time. All the time. She was on this program every Friday, and she was a commentator. And I would still like for her, she's always welcome to come on the program. But the point of the matter is, even though you have a busy schedule now, I've seen you make the efforts, and I've seen you sit on other platforms and have discussions. I don't understand why it is very difficult to make the effort to come here now. And yes, this is one individual I'm pointing out, but understand it's the executive of the THE. Because with respect to government ministers, we have said it before on this program, government ministers, not all of them, but many of them make themselves it's very difficult to even get in contact.
Yes.
The point I'm trying to raise with Dr. Faith B. Israel is, she said she's not in a position to reschedule. I really hope all is well because she didn't give a reason.
That is true.
But I could only assume that she didn't want to come on because they have nothing. They don't know what's going on in Tobago amongst themselves. They don't know what's going on in Tobago with their party, and therefore they can't come on air and try and make up excuses or try and talk around it. So I have to express my disappointment with Dr. B. Israel, and I have to express my disappointment with the executive of the THE, simply because you used to make yourself available all the time, and it seems as though you've now just distanced yourself for whatever reason. And quite frankly, I just don't think she could probably handle the heat.
So the thing is, there's more to say. I won't have enough time, but I'll try to say as much as I can. First of all, you made a deal with Watson Duke, right? Some might say a deal with the proverbial, not actual devil. And now you're regretting it because of how things unfolded. One could argue that they wouldn't have made it without the combination. I guess that is the one thing that reasonably you can't say. So it is what it is. But from that moment on, my issue is every time we have a new party, a new entity, it gets derailed in the most unfortunate of ways, and it just turns the voters further away from being willing to accept anybody except what is incumbent, right? One could argue the PDP only was the opposition party by default. There was no other party. There was no established second party for them to be number 3. They were number 2 by default. So, okay, you got a little bit of a blind fate. Fate blessed you. But the way things are going, there's an opportunity here that was here for that group of people. And I do wonder if they were not prepared for it. And I do wonder to some extent, I mean, there could be a whole set of things working against them, and I understand that. But the solution is not to clam up and talk less and be less transparent. I'm pretty sure to some extent, if we go back to the archives, some of the criticisms Dr. Bisrael herself had for the PNM was not properly communicating with the public.
So maybe it is true what Mr. Morris has been saying, that it's very difficult to even get through to Farley Augustine now. As I conclude, I'm looking at this comment on our live feed from a gentleman called Mr. Walters. He says, just so you could laugh, he's questioning, who are these 2 UNC agents? He's referring to you and I. It's so easy to see their biases. I hope they're not pretending to be balanced, because that would be an insult.
How, of all the criticisms this morning, I thought we were going to be the anti-Farley pro-PNM agents. No. I don't understand this one.
Actually, to be honest with you, everybody's entitled to their opinion. No, I'm not actually upset about that, Mr. Walters. You're very much open to your opinion. But even you making that comment, trying to say that we're biased, you yourself are showing a bias. The issue, sir, is if this is your very first time watching Talking Point, I think you should watch a few episodes of the past and a few episodes to come, and you realize we ain't painted no color for anybody in TNT. I think you'd realize we have no biases towards anyone here in this country, because we want something different and we want change. That's it for Talking Point. That's Sean Michael Small. I'm Keaton Shaw. Remember, today is a good day to have a good day. Make it work. Make it happen, ladies and gentlemen. And we will see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.